Some people are carrying pain that they never put into words, not because it didn't hurt, not because it didn't matter, but because somewhere along the way they learned to survive by being or staying silent. You've learned how to smile, how to keep working, how to keep showing up, how to say, I'm fine. But the truth is, silence does not always mean healing. Sometimes silence just means the wound went underground. And when you bury emotionally, has a way of showing up somewhere else in your relationships, in your anger, in your fear, in the way you shut down, in the way you overreact, in the way you push people away, in the way you keep saying, that's just how I am. But what if that's not just how you are? What if what happened to you, and what if the healing you've been praying for begins when you finally talk about what you've been avoiding? This is what we're talking about today, because you cannot heal from what you refuse to talk about. Welcome to the Daily Uplift Official for encouragement you can count on. This is the place where faith, encouragement, healing, growth, and the kind of conversations that help us become healthy or healthier in every area of life. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel, share the video with someone who may need it, and stay with me until the end, because this message may bring up something you've been trying not to think about. But sometimes the thing we avoid is the very thing we need to face. A lot of us were raised to believe that talking about pain meant weakness. You were taught your family business stays in the family. Don't tell anybody about what happens in this house. Stop crying. Get over it. Be strong. Other people have it worse. So you learned how to survive without expressing what you felt. And people praised you for it. They say, you so strong. You handle everything so well. You never let anything get to you. But what they didn't know was that you were carrying things you didn't have words for. Strength became silence, and silence became survival. But survival and healing are not the same thing. You can survive something and still be affected by it. You can function after the heartbreak and still carry the wound. You can forgive somebody and still need to process exactly what happened. You can move on physically while remaining stuck emotionally. And sometimes we confuse functionality or functioning with healing. You went back to work, you kept raising your children, you started another relationship, you kept going to church, you kept laughing, you kept posting pictures. So everybody assumes you're okay. Maybe you assume you were okay until something triggers you, and suddenly you realize that pain never disappeared. You simply learn how to live around it. Here's the part I really want you to hear. You may refuse to talk about the pain, but the pain may still be talking through you. It talks through your anger. It talks through your trust issues. It talks through your fear of abandonment. It talks through your need to control everything. It talks through your inability to receive love. It talks through your tendency to sabotage good relationships. It talks through your anxiety whenever somebody gets too close. It talks through the walls you've built around your heart. Sometimes the question isn't, why am I acting like this? Sometimes the better question is, what happened to me that I never dealt with? That question can change everything. Maybe you're not overly sensitive. Maybe you learned to stay alert because you never knew when something bad was coming. Maybe you're not simply maybe you're not simply bad at relationships. Maybe you never saw healthy relationships modeled. Maybe you're not excuse me. Maybe you're not incapable of trusting. Maybe somebody taught you that trusting was dangerous. Understanding the story behind the behavior doesn't mean excusing harmful behavior. It means becoming aware of what needs healing. One reason people refuse to talk about painful experiences is because they think talking about the past means being stuck in the past, but not necessarily. There's a difference between living in the past and understanding the past. If you broke your leg years ago and it never healed properly, acknowledging the original injury isn't living in the past. It's trying to understand why you're still limping today. The same can be true emotionally. Maybe something happened 20 years ago, and somebody says, that happened a long time ago. Yes, but if what happened 20 years ago is still affecting the way you live today, then time alone didn't resolve it. Time passes. Healing requires something more. Sometimes healing requires truth, understanding, grieving, forgiveness, boundaries, counseling, prayer, acceptance. Acceptance. And sometimes it requires finally saying, this happened to me and it affected me. There's power in naming something because what remains unnamed can remain confusing. Some people don't talk about, some people don't talk because they're afraid. They think if I start talking about this, I won't be able to stop. If I open that door, everything is going to come out. What if I fall apart? What if people look at me differently? What if they don't believe me? What if they judge me? What if talking about it makes it worse? Those fears can be real. And that's why it matters who you talk to. Not everybody deserves access to your deepest wounds. Everybody who asks you what happened doesn't need the full story. Healing doesn't mean announcing your pain to the world. It means finding safe, appropriate places where honesty is possible. That might be a trusted friend, a mature spiritual leader, a counselor, a therapist, a support group, a trusting family member, somebody who can listen without using vulnerability against you. Because vulnerability without wisdom can create additional hurt. But silence, because you fear vulnerability, can also keep you isolated. The goal is not to tell everybody, the goal is to stop telling nobody. And here's another challenge. Sometimes you don't think about it because you don't know how. Nobody taught you emotional luggage. You know, mad, sad, fine, fine. That's about it. But underneath mad may be disappointment, betrayal, fear, embarrassment, rejection, grief, powerlessness. Underneath, I don't care, maybe I care deeply and caring hurt. Underneath, I don't need anybody, maybe I need people before. I needed people before and they let me down. Underneath, I'm fine, maybe, or I'm fine by myself. Maybe I'm afraid if I depend on someone, they'll leave me. Sometimes healing begins when you learn to give language to your inner world. Instead of saying, I'm angry, you begin to say, I feel dismayed or dismissed. I felt abandoned. I felt disrespected. I felt afraid. I felt like I wasn't enough. That kind of honesty helps you understand yourself. And when you understand yourself, you can begin making healthier choices. Now, let me speak to those of you who say, I've already forgiven them. Good. Forgiveness can be powerful, but forgiveness doesn't necessarily mean the emotional work is complete. You can forgive somebody and still need to process grief. You can forgive somebody and still have boundaries. You can forgive somebody and decide not to resume that same relationship. You can forgive and still acknowledge that hurt me. Faith does not require emotional dishonesty. You don't have to pretend something didn't hurt in order to be spiritual. You don't have to act like you're unaffected to prove you trust God. You can have faith and still have tears. You can pray and still need counseling. You can forgive and still need healing. Those things can coexist. Denial can protect you temporarily, but eventually reality comes knocking. Maybe you keep saying, my childhood was fine, but you remember being afraid all the time. Maybe you say that relationship wasn't that bad, but you became a different person after it. Maybe you say, I'm over it, but you still become angry whenever the subject comes up. Maybe you say, it didn't affect me, but every relationship afterward has been shaped by it. Be careful with the words, it didn't affect me. Sometimes the biggest evidence that something affected us is how hard we worked to prove it didn't. Healing requires honesty, not public honesty, personal honesty. Can you admit it to yourself that hurt? I'm still angry. I'm still grieving. I'm still confused. I need help. I don't know how to move forward. Those statements are not weakness, they're clarity. Sometimes things Sometimes there are things you don't feel comfortable telling your friends. You may love your friends, but maybe you're afraid that they'll judge you. Maybe the situation is too complicated. Maybe it involves family. Maybe you don't want your friends choosing sides. Maybe you've told the stories before, but you know there are parts you never said out loud. A qualified counselor can provide a structured, confidential setting where you can explore difficult experiences and patterns. And sometimes the first breakthrough is simply hearing yourself say something out loud, something you've carried silently for years, because thoughts you can feel different when spoken. Suddenly you hear, I spent my whole life trying to earn approval. I never felt safe. I'm angry at someone I love. I'm terrified of becoming like my parents. I keep choosing the same type of relationship. I don't know who I am outside of taking care of everybody. And when it comes out of your mouth, you realize there it is. That's what I've been carrying. Talking about pain is not building your identity around what happened. It's the opposite. It's about separating what happened to you from who you are. You were betrayed, but betrayal is not your identity. You experienced rejection. Rejection is not your identity. You went through trauma. Trauma is not your identity. You made mistakes. Your mistakes are not your identity. You endured things you wish you never experienced, but your life is bigger than the worst thing that ever happened to you. Healing allows you to say, this is part of my story without saying this is the whole story. That's freedom. And there's another conversation some of us need to have, the honest conversation with God, not the polished prayer, not the prayer you think you're supposed to pray. The real prayer God, I'm angry. God, I don't understand. God, I'm disappointed. God, I'm afraid. God, I've been protecting. I'm okay. God, I need help. If God already knows your heart, then honesty doesn't frighten him. Let me say that one more time. If God already knows your heart, then honesty doesn't frighten him. Prayer isn't pretending. Prayer is relationship. And real relationships require honesty. There are places in Scripture where people cried out from grief, confusion, and desperation. They didn't always have beautiful words. Sometimes all they had was pain. And they brought that pain to God. Guess what? You can too. Something powerful can happen when you talk. The secret loses some of its power. The shame begins to lessen, or the shames begin to loosen. The confusion begins to make sense. The pattern becomes visible. The emotions have somewhere to go. And no, talking doesn't magically erase everything. You may still have work to do. You may still need ongoing support. You need boundaries. You need professional help. Or you may need boundaries. You may need professional help. You may need time. But now you're participating in your healing instead of hiding from it. And that's a major difference. So here's what I want you to do. Ask yourself one question. What is the thing I never talk about? The thing everybody thinks you're over. The thing you change the subject about. The thing you say doesn't bother you anymore. The thing you buried. The thing you promised yourself you would never revisit. Could that be connected to something you're struggling with today? You don't have to solve it today. You don't have to tell everybody. But maybe the next step is finding one safe person and saying, there's something I need to talk about. That's enough to start. Maybe healing doesn't begin with having all the answers. Maybe healing begins with finally telling the truth. If this message spoke to you today, share it with someone who has been carrying too much in silence. And if you're comfortable, put this in the comments. I'm choosing healing over silence. Let that be your reminder that if you don't have to, let that be a reminder that you don't have to keep carrying everything alone. And if you haven't already, subscribe and become part of this community. This is the Daily Uplift Official. For encouragement you can count on. Remember, your pain deserves honesty, your healing deserves attention, and your story doesn't have to end where the hurt began. Keep your faith, protect your peace, give yourself permission to heal, and as always, keep uplifting. And I'll see you in the next video.